Luke and R2-D2 may be the most iconic partnership with a droid since Anakin and R2, or C-3PO and R2, or all those other astromechs in Episode 1 in R2, or R2's girlfriend in R2. But despite their close bond stretching decades from Episode 4 onwards, one issue became so important that Luke risked potentially sacrificing R2-D2, learning about his mom, and in the process, learning about Order 66. The identity of Luke and Leia's mom was a question mark for a long time, with the majority of books covering the decades following Endor coming out well before the prequels did. It clearly wasn't something Luke and Leia could find out about in-universe either. The closest it was ever really touched on was with the Black Fleet Crisis trilogy, where Akana, a member of a Force sect called the Fallen Nasi, told Luke his mother had been a member of their order in order to trick him, leading to a pretty anticlimactic plotline. But finally, by the time of the Dark Nest Crisis books by Troy Denning, which were set from 35 to 36 years after Yavin, the prequels had been finished and all the information was there for someone to give to Luke and Leia. As it turned out, the person best positioned to give this information to Luke and Leia was actually R2-D2. Typically, droids in Star Wars get their memories wiped routinely, as leaving them for too long causes issues while running called personality faults. This is basically why droids of the same make and model have distinct personalities, which I always thought was a fun explanation, even if the implications of them getting memory wiped to suppress that are probably less than great. Luke never actually wiped R2's memory, which wasn't uncommon among elite pilots who felt the experience and idiosyncrasies of their astromech counterparts actually made them more reliable in battle. But for Luke, it was also because he considered the R2 he knew a friend or a family pet or something, like how I'd feel about my Roomba if I could afford one. If you'd like to help make that dream become a reality, you can like and subscribe as well as turn on notifications to help the channel grow. Not only had Luke refrained from wiping his memory, his prior owners had as well, unlike C-3PO, who we see was about to get his inconvenient prequel memories wiped at the end of Revenge of the Sith by their new caretaker, Captain Ramus Antilles. R2 remembered everything from the entirety of the Star Wars saga, though, and even had managed to record some of the most important events, withholding information from Luke and Leia specifically about their mother, because he had apparently come to believe he was protecting them. Luke had noticed a specific sector in his memory which seemed to be locked out and unused earlier on in their partnership, looking like a fault of some kind, but it didn't seem to be causing many problems, so Luke didn't bother fixing it until some damage from R2's casing had bridged the gap in his circuits. So when he was trying to run diagnostics on R2's memory files to fix these new issues, R2 seemed to be intentionally scrambling header names for files in this sector and playing dumb when Luke would ask him to go back over them. Ultimately, Luke ended up just soldering a connection, bypassing R2's attempts to block him, and Luke got his first glimpse of Padme, whose name he and Leia had heard as a potential answer to who their mother was before researching Senator Amidala. But in this instance, R2 started suddenly playing a pirated copy of the scene from Revenge of the Sith where Anakin tells Padme about his dreams of her death. Luke and Leia were thrilled to finally have an opportunity to really learn who their mom might have been, but R2 was still not giving up any of the rest of the information he clearly held in that sector, though they weren't yet sure if this was intentional on his part. So they enlisted the help of the most skilled slicer in the New Republic, Zacharias Ghent, to try to gain access to those files. Ghent confirmed that R2's reluctance was a choice, not just a system limitation, because he thought he was protecting them from whatever they might see. But Ghent also said it was impossible to break through the encryptions protecting an astromech like R2, who was running an Intellex 4 astromech brain, without the security systems wiping the whole droid in response. Ghent believed the only way to retrieve the memories would be to work with the original work of the designer of the astromech brains from Industrial Automata, who, thanks to disinformation spread by the Empire, the galaxy believed to have been an Imperial, designing droids for the Empire. While the Empire certainly messed around with galactic history a lot, this feels particularly weird to me, as astromechs of that kind had existed since the Phantom Menace, and this is something that we knew by the time the Dark Nest books had come out. And plenty of people in the galaxy who were alive during Dark Nest had still been around beforehand and seen these astromechs in action. It'd almost be like telling people in the 80s that airplanes had been invented in World War II. Either way, the major point was that retrieving the data they needed to crack R2 would be a big problem. Aside from the difficulties in finding equipment needed to extract the information, R2 was still not making things easier for Luke. Luke had started keeping a still not repaired and slightly malfunctioning R2 close to him at all times, as R2 kept trying to schedule himself for a memory wipe, running away from Luke to remove any further recordings before Luke and Leia could see them. As the Swarm War with the Killiks, the primary conflict in the Darkness crisis, progressed, they slowly discovered more information about their mother, some of it entirely false. The Darkness themselves, who were the primary antagonists in the Swarm War, tried to convince Luke that his wife, Mara, had been involved in his mother's death by planting false leads. It helped that the Darkness, acting through a former Jedi named Alema Rar, who had been taken into their hive mind, was able to use specific codes gained through the alleged memories of the wife of the alleged Intellects 4 designer, in order to force Artoo to show Luke a second memory, the conversation between Anakin and Padme about how Anakin may have found a way to save her. This confirmed Padme as their mother, reinforcing the possibility that, if the Darkness had this kind of information, they may have been right about Mara withholding other information about her own involvement. Alema also had given Luke a limited ability to use the same override to access information held by Artoo, which he used to force Artoo to replay another recording, when he had stolen from the Jedi Temple, of what Artoo called the Jedi Revolt, which he had taken in order to update his friend or foe data before heading to Mustafar. Luke and Han watched in horror as the clone troopers entered the temple, killing some of the younger students, and ultimately, when Anakin entered the frame and began his own slaughter, Luke told Artoo it was enough and left the room. After Han's repeated consolation attempts, Luke noted that the key probably forced Artoo to reveal his most secure memory, one which implicated himself in the severe crime of data theft, since he had stolen this recording from the Jedi Temple. Luke was attempting to meditate and project calm, but in his meditation he was levitating a model of an X-Wing, and Han noted that it was trembling, revealing just how much Luke was impacted by the footage, although he had at least already known intellectually that Vader had been involved in this. Seeing it was an entirely different matter. The doubt that Luke still had about Mara's role in his mom's death was making it possible for Lomi Plo, a powerful dark side user who essentially led the Darkness, to evade him. She could take the threads of doubt in someone's mind and literally cloak herself in them, making it important that Luke learn the truth before facing her. Luckily, a contact of the Jedi, Erin Thul, mother of another Jedi named Raynar, who also happened to be a joiner in one of the Killik nests, provided Luke and Mara with a gift: the R0 astromech prototype, complete with an Omni-Gate which would allow them to override all of Artoo's objections and force access to the memories he was hiding. Because they were unsure if the conflict between Raynar, the Killiks, and the Jedi had turned Erin against the Jedi, or even just if the Omni-Gate was still safe after so long, even if Erin was acting entirely in good faith, there was a significant chance that using it would still wipe out Artoo's memories and personality. When Artoo still refused to cooperate, Luke insisted that if he provided any resistance, he would instruct Ghent to intentionally wipe them out. Once installed, the Omni-Gate allowed them to see the holo recording of Anakin and Padme before he left for Mustafar, talking about the Jedi purge and Anakin's controlling nature. Luke and Mara were both incredibly disturbed by Anakin's behavior, but Jacen Solo, Han and Leia's son, who would soon become a Sith Lord and was very weird at this point in the series, said it just looked like a guy who wanted to protect his wife and that he could understand where Anakin was coming from. Unfortunately, Ghent warned that any further use of the Omni-Gate would deteriorate it, and he began an attempt to make a backup rather than having everyone immediately continue on to the next memory on Mustafar. The conflict continued to escalate with the Dark Nest, so it became necessary for Luke to watch the final memories before the backup gate was ready in order to allow him to face Lomi Plo sooner. Luke, Mara, and Jacen gathered again to watch the final recording from Mustafar. Luke was again dismayed by Anakin's behavior, while Jacen was still more sympathetic to what Anakin was doing. Artoo's recording got to about the point where Anakin and Obi-Wan start fighting just after Anakin drops Padme, before the Omni-Gate disintegrated and stopped him from playing it. Quote, Luke was stiff and ashen, fighting back tears. Mara was staring at the spot where Padme's limp form had vanished from the holo. Jacen was trying to decide where his grandfather had gone wrong, trying to puzzle out what flaw had made him a slave to his temper. Even R2-D2 remained silent, continuing to project a column of hollow static onto the floor. Tears were escaping down Luke's cheeks now, and Jacen could sense him struggling with the anger he felt towards his father. It left a fiery, bitter taste in the Force, all the more powerful because of the forgiveness that Luke had already granted Anakin Skywalker. R2, now finished protecting the secret, offered to show the rest voluntarily, but Luke refused, having been able to get the assurance he needed about Mara. R2's choices in all of this could easily have saved the galaxy a lot of real strife by not trying to spare Luke and Leia, who honestly should have been included in the storyline more, this particular heartache for so long. But Artoo tended to think about this in a more simpler or smaller scale with his loyalties as an astromech, and ultimately the story of Anakin is all about how making these kinds of selfish choices on what's best for others doesn't always work out so well, so at least I think on that level it fits thematically. I don't love a lot of what Dark Nest Trilogy does, but I think overall this was a pretty interesting way to handle bridging an information gap which largely existed because of real-world developments of the series, and it's something that has parallels with other things Luke learns about the Jedi as he went on in earlier books. Either way, let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed the video. Remember to like and subscribe if you want to see more, and as always, special thanks to the patrons you're seeing on screen right now.